torchlight illuminated his corpse-white skin. The man's sharp features were all exaggerated by the pitch black of shadow. He was scowling. He had the whole village rounded up. His knights, if they could be called that still, circled endlessly on their massive war horses. They thrust their torches into the air while chanting a word Terran did not know. The vampire's red eyes glittered. He wore a massive black fur on his back that alluded to a massive frame, a breastplate, and a billowing crimson cape. He had really nice boots. On his horse, he towered over the villagers. The vampire bellowed.
"I have heard of a Hungarian in your mix. The once great Holy Roman Empire took many of you second-most foul folk. But now my liege has your divine emperor's starved corpse on one of his spikes. It is decreed that all you unsavory mutts meet with the same fate."
A glee was in the creature's voice that turned Terran's stomach. The brush he and Carl hid in seemed poor safety from the madman and his ruffians. The light scratching from the box told him his sister was alive, though it was weaker now than before. The people remained silent. The vampire slung himself from his saddle and strode amongst the people. He snatched up a child by the throat in one hand. Cries rose, and a mother began to plead. The ruffians cheered and jeered.
"You have till the count of 3,
bellowed the vampire.
1, 2.
The child kicked and foamed. The mother pointed at a young woman, heavy with her own child.
"We should have started with that,"
the vampire bellowed. Bones snapped, cartilage crunched, and blood burst. The man's squeezed hand left the child's head and body falling in 2 separate pieces. Terran shifted upwards, his hand tightening on his quarterstaff, but Carl lay a hand on him. Other men from the village acted as Terran did. They leapt to their feet and charged the vampire. Many were old or lame. The vampire drew a side sword from his belt and lay about himself. Limbs flew and heads toppled. The knights swarmed in, hooves crushed skulls and blades became red. Women and children were caught in the trampling and slaughter. Terran gagged and shook. Carl's face was grim. The vile men laughed as they went about their cruel work. A few pulled women onto their horses and tore at clothing. The vampire was scowling at the end of it all.
"You idiots killed all of them!"
He spun, his sword pointing accusingly at the others.
"Not all, my lord,"
a man said, a woman struggling in his arms.
"You better get busy with them. Your bastards are needed in these blasted fields."
The men rode off then. Up and up they went to a dirty castle. Streaks of grime and filth striped the walls. Terran stood and began to pace. All sores from his journey here had vanished before what he had just witnessed. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Carl said. "Didn't think they would go that far." "No, thank you, sir." Terran's face was contorted with rage and contemplation. A thumping came from his box.
"Blood! Blood! Blood!"
"None of this blood, Nora. It'll upset your stomach." The castle was on top of a hill surrounded by a moat. The hill was bare of trees, but beyond the moat was a sparse forest. Carl had set Terran to watch one half of the moat for the vampire, in case the bastard snuck out of the castle to sleep. The sun peaked above the horizon. Terran stood and marched through the woods around the castle. He and Carl met towards the front of the fortress.
Guard in the front is nodding hard. Between 10 and 20 men reside inside the castle. We're going to take some risks here, but these bastards probably drunk themselves silly and won't be up at this hellish hour. I'll get at least one of the guards at the gate. Try to hit the other. I'll get him if you fail to.
Terran gripped his quarterstaff tightly.
Ever killed an animal? Asked Carl.
Yeah, chickens.
Same principle. Hit hard on the head for best results.
What if he has a helmet?
Carl smiled. Don't worry about the helmet.
The two guards leaned against the castle's open gate. They wore breastplates and open-faced helms. They held halberds and arming swords rested on their hips. One tugged his cloak around himself tighter. The other yawned. Sun-probed, bleary eyes. Like a black shadow, a man whose hair was shaggy and black whirled around the castle wall. A blade whipped out. A quick thrust surprised the first guard. He collapsed to the ground, gagging on his own blood. The other turned and growled as he raised his halberd. The guard started as a gangly man lunged around the corner, quarterstaff in hand. The wooden hafts slammed into each other, and the guard cried out in his own tongue. He shoved the quarterstaff away and prepared a thrust, only for the man with a massive sword to slam the sword into his face. The guard had tried to duck it, and now screamed as he stumbled back. Pity stole into Terran's heart. Carl's second blow took the man's head.
Quickly now, Carl said. It will not be long for them to be swarming us.
Within the castle walls was a tower and a rectangular house. Carl ran for the tower.
We'll clear the tower and hole up in there. If the vampire is in there, we'll kill him. If not, he will come to us in a restrained manner. His merry men will be forced to come in one at a time.
The tower door was unbarred. The first floor held a small set of bunks, with women peeking nervously from covers. The next was a living room with a table, rugs, and chairs. The last had a bleary-eyed guard, just waking from their footsteps. Carl slew him and left the body on the stairs. The last room held a young woman who clutched a child to her breast. She was in a bed of fine white silks. Grand wardrobes dominated the room. A table with a chessboard, canvas, and paintings. Trophies from men and beast. The woman screamed. A bell rang in the courtyard. Carl cursed.
Damned bloody vampire isn't here. Terran, the wardrobe.
He gestured towards the door. Terran nodded and rushed for the heavy piece of furniture. As he dragged it, the woman stopped, screaming, and changed from her cries for help to an accusing glare.
What purpose drives you to blockade yourself in here with me?
Carl scratched the bit of stubble that had grown on his chin.
Kill your bastard husband, I suspect.
She smiled.
Is that all? Good luck. You're both dead. Leave me alive and unharmed, and I might be able to convince Tulmir to spare you.
Carl grimaced. He approached her slowly, his sword sheathed. She glanced from him to the wall where a sword hung. He lunged. She screamed again and kicked. Carl grunted from the foot in his gut, but he grasped her. He grappled and restrained her in a great tangled mess. A banging came at the door, shouts between the woman and her guards outside.
Terran, bring a rope, Carl shouted. Tie her tight so she can't stab us.
There was a slamming at the door. Terran had never tied anyone up before. He tied as tight as he dared.
Too loose,
Carl grumbled, tightening them himself. Terran checked afterwards. The ropes seemed cruel in their tightness. The wardrobe rattled.
You fools! You're all dead when Tulmir finds you!
Carl gagged her. Terran's heart thudded in his ears. His hands were slick with sweat. Angry shouts screamed for blood outside the rattling door.
Carl?
Terran turned to the knight, only to find him sleeping in one of the large chairs in the circular room. The banging stopped around midday. Later that evening, Carl woke up. He stretched and yawned.
Catch as much sleep as you can, boy.
I don't think I can.
Try.
He did. Terran woke from the soft scratching Nora made in her box. Carl stood by the door. The sword's guard rested on his shoulder as he held its blade in thick gloves. He grinned wickedly. Let her out.
Right now?
She needs to be free when we get him. The wait was a short one. The door was torn from its hinges and the wardrobe thrown aside. The vampire Terran had seen before entered. Carl struck. The blade blurred, and the woman's scream was muffled through her gag. The vampire fell to the ground as a sharp clang sounded. He stumbled as he rose. "Hit his head!" shouted Carl, and Terran, in a panic, did. The man wore a helmet with a large dent from Carl's guard. The quarterstaff slammed into the vampire's head, and it, in turn, slammed into the ground and bounced. The woman cried. Men yelled and died on the stairs as they struggled to get around Carl's guard. Terran glanced at the woman as tears streamed down her face. A vice grip wrapped around his ankle. The bones screamed as fingers dug viciously in. The vampire struggled forward. Terran yelled and slammed the butt of the staff down. The vampire's head bounced again, but his arm didn't budge. The creature came closer. Nora's hand dragged her forward. She bit into the wrist of the vampire. Terran was beating the thing's head again and again. The helmet, beat by beat, went from convex to concave. The grip loosened, then fell. Then the corpse turned to ash. The woman wailed through her gag.
Sorry,
Nora called to the widow as she lunged for a wardrobe.
Move, sir.
Carl ducked away just as Nora hefted the massive dresser over her head and tossed it down the stairs. She threw so hard that she flew into the opposite wall. Her spine was twisted the wrong way, but before that drove Terran to panic, Nora had twisted herself back to rightness and stood on shaky knees. "Run! We need to get out of here!" Carl bellowed over the panicked cries of the ruffians. Terran stumbled. His ankle was killing him. Nora ducked under him and hefted. They tipped and almost toppled, but Terran righted himself. The ruffians had fled Nora, letting her and Carl flee the castle. Nora beamed. She was like Terran remembered. A head shorter than he, Nora stood as a thin girl, barely brushing womanhood. Her hair was still wild, and her irises still pink. They still glowed in the dark, like a cat's. But she had the muscle farm work had given her. Her face was round and full. She danced then, on her own feet, as she couldn't have for the last week. It felt longer than a week. For her and Terran, a lifetime seemed to have passed. But now she was whole again. Whole for now. Who knew how long the blood in her would last?
Who's our knight?
She asked in a mischievous whisper. She gestured to Carl, who slept back to a tree. Sir Carl of House Wallow.
Is he wed?
No, I don't think so. But I haven't asked.
You should.
Nora, he's a decade your senior.
So?
Taryn shifted uncomfortably, then he stuttered. He swears too much.
So,
Nora,
you're still a kid. So are you. Madeline is our age. She's a year older than you, not to mention plain.
Plain, why, I oughta... Taryn tackled her, only for them to forget something very important. Vampires have the strength of 10 men. Taryn ended up with his limbs tangled around a branch above them. Nora snorted.
The look on your face!
Taryn laughed. Nora joined him. Shut it, you blasted bloody kids! I'm trying to sleep here, Carl barked. Corinna prostrated herself before Vlad the Third Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Emperor of Wallachia. You have come to ask a favor of me, woman?
My husband, Tulmir, was one of your counts of Glut. He was killed near the border.
So you want me to start a war with the remainder of the Holy Roman Empire? I am a busy man with the Ottomans.
No, I wish only for your gift of Glut.
The Emperor smiled, a vicious smile. Take my gift and have your own vengeance.
Thank you, your eminence,
she cried, and greedily drank the blood he held in his palm. The door slammed open. A man, huge with muscle and steel, stood in the empty frame. A slab of iron that might have been a sword had it been smaller was held in one hand. The other held a log. His body was all in shadow but for his eyes, that glowed in the candlelight like a wolf's. Rain drummed like footsteps of an oncoming army. Lightning rent the sky with fury and light. Darley stood and swung up his chair. You won't hurt anyone here. The man was silent as he stood. Then he moved. Darley had never seen a man move so fast. Christine's head shattered into a million pieces. Darley swung the chair desperately, trying to defend his children. The beast ignored him. Darley Jr. was next, then Lorraine. The man left Caroline, Christine's and Darley's eldest. The man swept the log through Darley's legs. They shattered. Desperately, Darley clawed at the large man, only for him to seem to forget him. Instead, he took Caroline. As she cried for help, begged for it, only for Darley to bellow with useless rage. When the man was done, Caroline was broken, but not dead. The man turned to Darley. You want my head, the brute mused. Darley could only growl through the pain. Yes, you want it, but your leg's so sad. You'll never walk again. You damned bloody bastard. You devil spawn! No. Name not devil. He too scared to compliment work. I tears. Not waters of your face, but god of duels. I'll kill you, you sick dog fucker. Now. Be nice to, daughter, yes. She be in better place soon. You help you help her. The creature offered a palm full of blood. Drink and be worthy of your vengeance. Darley did. In his hunger, in his need for blood, he fell upon his own Caroline. Thus his wrath was piqued, and never did it descend from the sky of heaven.